a lot about the legislation that's about to get passed. What is the push that we need to take it to that level? What is holding us back from creating the legislation that the rest of the world has already implemented?
Oh, about 50 countries have labeling of GMOs, but not the U.S. That's because the FDA is mandated officially to promote biotechnology. This happened in the early 90s. They were told to fast-track biotechnology, and so they brought onto their staff, as the number 2 person in the agency, Michael Taylor, Monsanto's former attorney. Now, Monsanto's the big biotech company here. And the policy that Michael Taylor oversaw, which is still the policy for the FDA, is that companies like Monsanto, who told us that Agent Orange and DDT and PCBs were safe, they can determine whether GMOs are safe without even telling the FDA, without doing any required safety studies. They can put it on the market without any labeling. So this was to promote biotechnology. We find now that 44,000 secret internal memos of the FDA, made public from a lawsuit, showed that the policy was based on a lie. The policy said that the agency was not aware of any information showing that GMOs were significantly different. In fact, the overwhelming consensus among the scientists working at the FDA was that GMOs were not only different, but dangerous, and could lead to allergies, toxins, new diseases, and nutritional problems. They had urged their superiors to require long-term study, but were ignored. So we can't actually expect the FDA, or even the Obama administration, which is now moving lockstep with Monsanto. What happened to Michael Taylor? After working at the FDA, he went back to Monsanto and became their vice president. Now he's Obama's U.S. food safety czar. So in order to eliminate GMOs, there's a couple of options we have. One is, if we can get it labeled, say, in one state, like California, that would be enough. Because most Americans say they would avoid GMOs if labeled, 53%. And if that's the case, companies are certainly not going to keep the GMOs in their product if they have to tell people that their product contains GMOs. So there's a ballot initiative that is now being tabled around California that's expected to be on the November 2012 ballot. There's a lot of energy, and that alone could create the tipping point we need. But even if we don't get that on the ballot, even if that doesn't happen, there are signs of a coming tipping point now. In Europe, when a high-profile food safety scandal erupted because a gag order was lifted on a scientist who could finally say what he knew about the dangers of GMOs, there was over 700 articles written within a month. 10 weeks after the gag order was lifted, virtually every major food company committed to stop using GM ingredients within a single week. That was back in 1999. Because the companies in Europe realized that using GMOs in Europe had become a marketing liability. In bovine growth hormone, it became a marketing liability. It was kicked out. Walmart kicked it out of its milk. Monsanto sold the drug to Eli Lilly. Now we're seeing the signs of a growing tipping point against all GMOs in the United States. We think that any drop in market share whatsoever that can be attributed by these companies to the anti-GMO sentiment growing in the U.S. would be sufficient to create a tipping point. And we think that that's going to happen. We think as little as 5% of U.S. shoppers avoiding GM ingredients could do the trick. Now this year, in 2011, we've had over 100 events. Actually, that's just in this month, which is October's non-GMO month. Over 100 events. A march on Washington from New York. We have a Label It campaign with over 400 organizations supporting that. We have now millions of people engaged. The non-GMO label, the voluntary non-GMO label, is one of the fastest growing health claims on all packaging in the United States. So we're seeing the early signs of a tipping point. At responsible-technology.org, you can sign up to join non-GMO tipping point groups in your local community or nationally, focused on the most receptive groups like parents and healthcare practitioners and religious people that think GMO really means God move over. So we have now an infrastructure for people to get involved. We've taught about 700 people to speak about GMOs, and we're seeing now millions engaged. So our target is 5% of U.S. shoppers, 15 million, and I think that's what we need to create the tipping point in the United States so we can say goodbye to GMOs in the food supply and reclaim a healthier food supply.
Thank you so much for being with us, Jeffrey. It's been a wealth of information, and I cannot wait to spread it virally through social media. We all have the power to make that tipping point happen, and it can spread just like Occupy Wall Street has, just like other campaigns on the internet. Thank you so much for being with us, And that's it for us live from Green Festival Los Angeles.